Hello and most welcome to 809 of the Heidegger series. We will today continue where we left off in 807. Muted and Hidden Monsters in Revelation 12 by Heather Macumber. Last time we went into how something becomes real by having action, and that physical appearance is different forms of doings, actions, intentions. Things are in the flesh. And we talked about the woman whore, the woman Babylon is becoming incarnated because of her hybridity, of her participating in the world, acting in it, changing. And this becomes good, or even this is goodness. And as all things, it is, if you like, ambiguous. It needs to be ambiguous. Remember the Kleinbottle to be one. If it is not two, it cannot be one. It reminds me of Heraclitus, who said, a singularity that speaks from plurality. I don't remember the verbiage exactly to the point, but from multiplicity stems singularity. It is not a singularity that excludes plurality. It is not the classical physics that says that all groups stem from individual atoms or something of the sort, and how they exist by themselves in isolation. And where space itself exists and come into existence by isolation, in isolation. How it's disjunct and the disjunctions aggregates, and the disjunctions are the original matter or causes of reality, always mysteriously hidden from view in the otherworldly atomic region. Site I didn't take last time, which I underline, is the note from David E. Orn, third line here. I'll read it now instead. Start with a little easing up. It is Saturday anyway. However, as David E. Orn notes, The text first sets up a conflict between the woman and the dragon, with a corresponding identification as symbols or signs in the heavens. Both the woman and the dragon are labeled as Simeon, that simultaneously aligns and divides them. Simeon. It's the simultaneous pointing in two directions, which makes one direction and one semen, if you like, possible. And I will continue to read where I left off in 1807. Fantastic beasts. Revelation 12 is remembered vividly by artists for the aerial combat between the dragon and Michael and the angels. This is viewed as another example of the combat myth, where the chaos beast is defeated by heavenly forces. However, as David E. Orn notes, the text first sets up a conflict between the woman and the dragon, with their corresponding identification as symbols or signs in the heavens. Both the woman and the dragon are labeled as Simeon, that simultaneously aligns and divides them. However, the later battle between the dragon and the angels has consistently overshadowed the woman's own resistance against the dragon. Indeed, the assumed passivity of the woman by scholars has also added to the reduced focus on her as an agent. Orn identifies her as the hero of the passage, but views her as victim hero, since she is acted upon rather than the initiator. For Tina Pippin, the woman clothed with the sun fulfills typical stereotypes of the passive and maternal figure who must be rescued by a male. To an extent, I would agree that the passivity of the woman is apparent in the text. However, inaction can also be a form of resistance. The woman's non-compliance lacks the drama of the cosmic battle between the dragon and the angelic hosts. But it aligns with models of resistance by marginalized communities who are forced to work around systems of power. James Scott refers to these phenomena as hidden transcripts, where the powerless critique dominant systems through indirect forms of resistance that include poaching, foot dragging, pilfering, flight. Although her actions do not fit the typical model found in many hero versus monster myths. Her agency is discernible in her refusal to yield to the dragon and her flight into the wilderness. It is common to read the woman's actions in the text as passive, viewing her as one who is acted upon. The following description from Marla J. Selvage illustrates well the tension in the text. The writer's view of this woman is ambivalent, ambivalent. She appears to have her own place in the desert hideout. Her stature is majestic and supranormal, but she exhibits no supernatural powers. The moon is at her feet, and there are stars for the crown, for her crown. But she possesses no armament, no strategies to fight the dragon. She cowers before the dragon instead of standing and fighting with him. She cannot eliminate the dragon, and so must deal with his incessant war. Salvage finds evidence for the otherness of the woman and is correct in noting her vulnerability, considering the dragon's overwhelming menace. However, there's a persistent strength evident in her refusal to submit to the dragon and her subsequent flight from his pursuit. As Lee notes, unlike the worshippers in Revelation 13:4 and 14:9 to 11, the woman never worships the beast and continues to resist the dragon. Moreover, once her son is rescued, no one comes to the immediate aid of the woman. And she must set off on her own. though she is provided with wings and physically sustained in the wilderness, she still must stand against the dragon, even if she cowers in fear. Thus, the woman's escape to the wilderness should also be read as part of her active resistance to, to the power and aggression of the dragon. Diane Tracy Cole draws parallels between the woman's flight to the wilderness and that of Hagar's experiences in Genesis 16 and 21. She considers both women as active agents, stating Hagar and the apocalyptic woman are anti-heroines. The stories initially portray them as objects. But subsequent events reveal them to be actors. Danger does not immobilize them. They are resilient, creative in turning adversity into triumph. The agency of the woman is further illustrated by her tenacity to survive the harsh conditions of the wilderness. And even the act of eating is a sign of her resistance. Just as the woman and the dragon are aligned by John as over otherworldly creatures. A third monster lurks at the edges of the text. In contrast to the notoriety of the great red dragon, the presence and fantastic nature of this being are rarely observed by scholars. It is common to note the links to four goddesses behind the prominent figures of Jezebel, the woman clothed with the sun, woman Babylon, and the New Jerusalem. However, a fifth goddess waits in the shadows, the Mother Gaia, whose role in the narrative warrants more consideration, especially as a monstrous entity. After the woman's flight, it becomes apparent that she holds no hope against the aggression and strength of the dragon that threatens to overwhelm her with a flood of water. The monstrous mouth of the dragon is highlighted as it was earlier in the attempt to devour the woman's child. Here in the wilderness, no angel comes to the woman's rescue. Rather, the earth, with its own gaping maw, swallows up the torrent issuing from the dragon. Thus, an uncanny alignment is underscored between the dragon and the earth, both monstrous, though only the dragon is typically identified as such. A similar animated and personified earth appears elsewhere in the Hebrew Bible, where its monstrous mouth is again featured. In the Exodus account, it is the earth that swallows the Egyptians in response to God's judgment. And later, Korah and his household experience the horrific animation of the earth who ingests them whole. Upon witnessing this event, the rest of the Israelites flee in terror, crying, "The earth will swallow us." Mary K. Wakeman understands the earth as monstrous in Exodus 15:2. However, she links its activities to the Ugaritic god Mot and sees it as the opponent of God. Oh, you can stay there. Although similar imagery is used, the earth is not the opponent of God, but functions as an agent that enacts judgments reminiscent of other dangerous divine creatures. In Revelation 12, the earth monster is deliberately juxtaposed with a dragon as their actions mimic each other with a threatening and terrifying mouths. Realigning one's lens to see all fantastic creatures as monstrous reveals not only the woman clothed with the sun, but the earth monster who rises to defend her. This tableau of divine combat between the dragon and the earth firmly establishes the woman clothed with the sun as part of this cosmic drama, reinforcing her otherworldly nature. Conclusion. Although the book of Revelation abounds with monsters both in heaven and the abyss, few consider the woman clothed with the sun among their ranks. Popular conceptions of monsters typically equate them with evil, chaos, disgust. As a result, the wondrous aspect of the monster is hidden from the reader. Lying just out of reach. The history of interpretation regarding the book of Revelation is particularly problematic in creating artificial categories that obscures monstrous attributes of creatures aligned with a heavenly region. The woman of Revelation 12 that appears in the heavens is such a fantastic being that should not be excluded from the category of the monstrous. She is presented as part of a cosmic narrative, and her otherness is apparent in her own hybrid appearance. However, is the label of monster for the woman clothed with the sun simply another example of renaming and thus subverting her real identity? Reading her as monstrous is not intended to flatten her character, but to expand the dialogue of traditions that echo in John's fusion of sources. The use of monster theory recognizes the fluidity of the woman's form as she reflects many different possibilities, from ancient goddesses to human counterparts. However, attempts to classify and categorize the woman has been less than successful, partly because she does not neatly fit these roles. Like other monsters, she eludes classifications and challenges ways of seeing the world, showing the limits of what it means to be human in her own extraordinary body. And that finishes the reading of Heather Macumber's Hidden, Muted and Hidden Monsters in Revelation 12. By happenstance, I fumble across another abomination or hybrid. It was a mentioning of a pink unicorn. And when we discussed it, we start disputing whether it was possible to imagine it without ever having contact with it, without no action, interaction, and no relation. I would say that is not a true hybrid or a monster, if you like it. No, it's a flattened out left hemisphere representation. more in the region of empty concept, having no bearing and effect in the world. These monsters are different. They are cast of the earth. They are truly of the foundation because they contain the most important traits of contradictions. If we go to page 99, I think I'll stop there. There will be 14 lines down. It's a parenthesis with a number 1 within it. 2 different battles or interactions take place. We're speaking about the uncanny, specifically centered around the combat myth. 2 different battles or interactions take place. 1, the woman versus the dragon. 2, the earth monster versus the dragon. Here we have 2 distinct differences. We have combats, we have a war going on. These battles are the producers of antagonistic forces. Most participating in constructing wholeness of reality. I'd say that is the role of the monsters. Without them, the good force or the understanding of heaven and harmony on earth would only be a dream, like a pink unicorn, flattened out, lacking that interior reality that comes from active participating in the world. Combat, war is one of those things that makes existence come about. It is not a trait that comes by itself. It has behind it a massive complexity. If we then go to page 100, actually start, sorry, the last sentence of page 99. Sorry about that. The woman's non-compliance lacks the drama of the cosmic battle between the dragon and the angelic hosts. But it aligns with models of resistance by marginalized communities who are forced to work around systems of power. James Scott refers to these phenomena as hidden transcripts, where the powerless critique dominant system through indirect forms of resistance that include poaching, foot dragging, pilfering, flight. Although her actions do not fit the typical conflict model found in many hero versus monster myths, her agency, that's the important word, is discernible in her refusal to yield to the dragon and her flight into the wilderness. There's poaching, foot dragging, pilfering. She does things. She is what she does, doing nothing like the pink unicorn would render her flat. But this is not the case. She is highly active. Yes, it doesn't fit the conflict model, but Macumber should look out for all the actions that yields existence. It makes coming into the world to be carnated possible. Your deeds will set you free. And everything that acts, everything that exists, also have these deeply significant traits of ambivalence and ambiguity. And there is this interesting change, the last sentence continuing on page 101. The last sentence on 100. Continuing on 101. The stories initially portray them as objects, do you hear? But subsequent events reveal them to be actors. They come into existence. Danger does not immobilize them. They are resilient, creative in turning adversity into triumph. It gets better. The agency of the woman is further illustrated by her tenacity to survive the harsh conditions of the wilderness, and even the act of eating is a sign of her resistance. You do reality. They start out on a low level as objects, as objects incapacitated, almost being like private language, crippled, with their legs amputated, non-movable, and to be revealed as being actors, involved, observers, getting the superposition to collapse, and not even danger immobilize them, because they have been doing this for thousands and thousands of times. The constant iteration that creates knowledge and the possibility to be and to survive as well. We go further to the bottom, the fourth line from the bottom. Mary K. Wakeman understands the earth as monstrous in Exodus 15:2. However, she links its activities to the Ugaritic god Mut and sees it as the opponent of God. Here, we literally have against, the word mot, meaning against in Swedish and Norwegian and Danish. This is the force it goes against and make God and mot, or anti, powerful, working in the world, being ambivalent and ambiguous. All those things, that means that you are participating. Being monosemic is that the one saying it, the one to whom it is referred, are passive. They are the objects that were mentioned earlier. But by doing, you become a person, and in the end, you even get a soul. You get ensouled. We go to page 102. And on the third line is go away from myopia, we call it. Realigning one's lens to see all fantastic creatures as monstrous reveals not only the woman clothed with the sun, but the earth monster who rises to defend her. This tableau of divine combat between the dragon and the earth firmly established the woman clothed with the sun as part of this cosmic drama, reinforcing her otherworldly nature. If you go down to the conclusion, in the second paragraph, about 10 lines down. However, is the label of monster for the woman clothed with the sun simply another example of renaming and thus subverting her real identity? Reading her as monstrous is not intended to flatten her character, but to expand the dialogue of traditions that echo in John's fusion of sources. She becomes real, and the monstrosity is not there to take her away from the earth. No, just the opposite. That is what makes her real. To come into existence, to be a thing, to be able to participate. That shows the participatory agency that comes by constantly repeating your actions, recognizing that you are a participating thing that gets you from the object situation and you become an actor, or if you prefer, an observer in and into the doings of the world. Maybe a comment here for my dear colleague Kalle. Are you with us?
Yes. I thought that it could be nice actually to read the verses in question from Revelation 12. I will read 3 verses. It's from verse 15. And the serpent cast out of his mouth water as a flood after the woman, that he might cause her to be carried away. Let me see. Away of the flood. And the earth helped the woman, and the earth opened her mouth and swallowed up the flood, which the dragon cast out of his mouth. And the dragon was wroth with the woman and went to make war with the remnant of the seed, which kept the commands of God and have the testimony of Jesus Christ. The key word is mouth, one of the keywords, I think. So also, as she comments here appropriately on this page, yes, on this page 102, in Revelation 12, the earth monster is deliberately juxtaposed with the dragon, as their actions mimic each other with their terrifying mouths. I think this is aptly put. So sometimes we have often read that evil, that is Satan, imitates God.
Yeah.
But here it's actually the other way around. Is the good that imitates the bad.
Yeah.
Because it's a dragon who uses his mouth.
Yeah, definitely. Indeed, yeah.
And
It's
this
a
may
mirroring. It's a mirroring.
Absolutely. And speaking of mouths, I want to show you something artistic from Marso. And this is a famous garden. 70 kilometers outside of Rome.
Oh.
No, Marso. This was a famous manieristic garden designed in the middle of the 16th century.
Yeah. Wow.
And there is a theory that even the great Michelangelo himself would have designed it. Let me see. And the great Salvador Dali went there also to be inspired by this great garden. I have a lot of publicity here. I think it's better to open the Wikipedia page.
Parco dei Monstri.
Yes.
Monster Park. Wow. Bomarzo.
Yes. See, let me open this site here. Speaking of mouths and swallowing up. So here it's difficult to say if this mouth is a good mouth or is it a bad mouth, so to say.
Yeah, definitely. It seemed maybe suggesting could be it's both.
Yes, indeed, because it's the entrance to hell or the underworld.
Ah.
The hell mouth.
Aha.
Here, thank you. Here is the hell mouth. It's with a quotation from Dante there also. You could actually see Dante's a quotation from Dante, I think. There are many monstrous statues. It's about speaking of monstrosity. I think it fits well with the theme. So let me go to something else here. No, not this, but so let me see. Fifth. I want to comment on. So here on page, what is it? Page 101. It is common to note the links to four goddesses behind the prominent figures of Jezebel, the woman clothed with the sun, one Babylon, the New Jerusalem. However, fifth goddess, I don't know, is it really possible to see the New Jerusalem, for instance, as a goddess? I don't know. Possible.
Yeah.
Or so it's question of labeling. Do you want to call them goddesses, monsters, or what? Where do you put the label? Speaking of labels, so let me go to the word the phrase that you comment on, and the last here. However, is the label, excuse me, of monster for the woman clothed with the sun simply another example renaming? So if I would go to a child, to a baby and say, what a cute monster.
Yeah.
They could perhaps take it as a joke or be offended, the parents of the child. So I don't know if he gained anything by renaming the woman and call her a monster, or okay, it's a hybrid creature. And we have speaking much about the problem of renaming or relabeling in the humanities.
Yes, it's
So
renaming is the left hemisphere's idea of creating something new. It's a very interesting feature. The left hemisphere is under the illusion that whatever it can imagine, it can actually think as well. So it is in the megalomaniac, or well, that's not proper, or the almost sick idea. If I think something, it can come into existence in my head or in my imagination. But we know the right hemisphere knows that you can only think the things that you have been doing. Otherwise, they will be empty. They will have nothing to them.
So renaming would be in this instance a problem of the Peter of the box from Wittgenstein, that you create your own language in your head.
Yeah, you try to do that, and the renaming process is like a part of it. It's a symptom of that misunderstanding.
Is okay, is true to a certain sense, but still you share the renaming with your, if you're a professor, you share it with your students. If you get my point.
A bit slower, Kalle.
Yes. So if you are a professor and you rename something and teach it to your students, it's not question of prepared language, because you share it with your students. Hans?
Yeah, I think, that's a complex question, Kalle. Thank you for that one. Well, it depends how well that language, those words, they're all different, are in the language game. So sharedness doesn't mean that it gives reality. Depends to what degree it's shared and how often. There's a famous quote, I don't know if it comes from Anscombe, but no expression can be understood only once. It needs to be done several times and in the actual situation. So for instance, if the professor is active in his reality, doing things, his words will have the force of meaning and he will be able to share. But if he's not, he will possibly, one solution is to go back to renaming and subverting the words, giving the pretense of them having a new meaning by giving them a lexical reference, if you get my drift, Kalle.
So no expression like the expression monster cannot be understood only once?
No.
Or what?
No. It needs to be trained, it needs to be repeated. It needs to be well established.
And we have actually an example from this from the paper of yesterday. I could show it quickly, I think, because I think you appreciate it. It was a quotation from Wittgenstein. It's in a paper by Canfield. Can you see the screen?
Yeah, we had previously, yes, definitely.
Yes. So let me show, since it's fresh in my mind, from let me see. It's a quotation from Wittgenstein. It's easy. Let me see. Yes, it's here. This last phrase. For concepts are not for use on a single occasion.
No, very good. Yeah, most definitely. Most definitely.
But how would you apply this sentence to the, let's say I'm a professor and a renamer. I say now Mary, or say, let's say the son with the woman labeled.
A bit slower.
So how do we apply this? Say now I'm a professor. I'm saying to my students, the woman with the son is not really a woman, it's not a Mary, but it's really a monster. So how would you say, how would you apply this situation to this phrase?
Wow, that's a question and a half. Well, I can only make up an answer here. If he's well established in the Geschichte, the Heideggerian word of apostolic transferal of doings, grew up in a family that had that understanding, and having repeated that in his childhood, and also, and this is very hard to explain, the woman the woman Babylon. How do you do that? We don't know that. We can't answer that. The only thing is that we know that concepts needs to be done. And if he does that, it will be true.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, that is a matter of degree. Maybe the example of Kanya, the beer, is a better one. If you have only used expression Kanya, which means beer in Spanish, a few times, and you go to the taverna and you order one, the reaction will not be as smooth as if you were to repeat it 1,000 times in different situations, in apt situations. The fractal transference will be quicker and more effective. You see, knowledge is a movement, and that needs to be repeated again and again and again, and it needs to be a little bit different every time, and it needs to be in the, so to speak, apt, proper situation. Standing by a river and ordering a beer. Or the professor maybe being in his small cell, just repeating the woman monster without having any actual doing contact with it, could lead to that she gets flattened out, or the understanding gets flattened out. I hope that was helpful, Kalle.
Yes, absolutely.
I think
Perhaps it's easy to think about it in pictures like the rabbit and duck. It's really one and the same. It's not question of woman is married, but it's both and. You put you put different pictures together, and it becomes a monster in a way.
Definitely. Very good. Why, thank you very much. I think we'll be ending now. Kalle, what do you say?
Let's end this, and perhaps Armandis end with this picture here. Bomarso.
Look into the orca.
Bomarso, 70 kilometers outside north of Rome. Perhaps designed by Michelangelo to refer to.
How far was it? Can you say?
Perhaps designed by Michelangelo. Designed by Michelangelo to refer to. This is the entrance to the hell, the monstrous entrance to hell.
There we have it.
And there, the mouth is both your friend and your enemy.
Oh, beautiful. Why, thank you very much, Kalle Lundahl. Thank you, everyone, for watching, listening in. Have a very nice morning, day, afternoon, or night, wherever you are. Bye-bye for now.